I'm a big believer in having lots of people read your copy and give you feedback, and they see it. So I like to write at night when there's no phones ringing, no interruptions, and I'm just sitting there, and then I go, oh, sometimes I'll close my eyes and meditate to try to get a deeper understanding of something. But writing is very transformative. It's definitely, I've had many aha moments in the middle of the night going, oh, I get it. Something you kind of knew up here, but then you get a deeper understanding of the same thing.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about that. I want to kind of talk about your process and what you'd suggest to people in writing. I think when people hear your story, they might sometimes think, well, boy, Jack did this, and then he did this, and he did this, and he was successful. And maybe he didn't have some of the same doubts that I have, or some of the, is my book good enough, or, the challenge of getting started, the battle within. For you, was writer's block or doubt or any of this kind of a problem, or did you pretty methodically just take one step after the other?
I never had writer's block, although I've helped people deal with it because I used to be a psychologist. But I certainly had self-doubt. I mean, who am I to write a book? Do I know enough? Then I would think about some of my college professors or experts that I'd studied, and I thought, what if they read the book and they think it's stupid, if it's not good enough, it won't measure up?
Yeah.
And I always used to think when I was writing, I want to write to that single mom in Arkansas. I want to write to that 20-year-old in New Jersey who just got out of school or maybe dropped out of school. So I would imagine these people reading it and trying to write in what I call a very conversational style. Mm-hmm. I think one of the things that stops people from writing is they think they have to be better than they are. And if you can talk about it, you can write about it. And I teach people that normally when you write, you try to start to sound more intelligent than you are, and you get in a way. It becomes stilted. So for me, when I'm writing, especially nonfiction, it's different if you're writing novels. But if you're writing nonfiction, it's like, I want to be like I'm right here with you having a cup of coffee. Yep. I'm just telling you what I know about the topic.
Yeah, it's powerful. And so for you, I find different writers have different ways of getting started. Some, for example, like to have a basic outline of what they're doing. Some people talk their books. That's I often suggest that to people who feel that's their best modality. For you, when you're doing a book, how do you get started?
I've gone at it about 4 or 5 different ways, depending on the book. The first book, there was no other book like it, so I really had to create it. And somehow I got into this rhythm. I had to start with an inspirational quote, each of the 100 ways, and some quote about self-esteem or about feelings or about self-love or whatever it might be, usually by someone famous that they would have heard of, like a Paul McCartney from the Beatles or a famous psychologist or an actor, something so they could relate. Yeah. And then I would have the topic, and I would lay out the concept and then the how-to. And then I wanted a graphic on every page opposite the exercise to somehow make the book really... There's something called point of purchase. When you go to a bookstore, you pick up a book. This is the point of your purchase. And if you're leafing through the book and nothing captures you, you just kind of go on. Yeah. But if there's a cartoon, you'll stop and read it. If there's a picture, you'll stop and look at it. There's a caption underneath. If there's a graph or a diagram or something, or a big, a quote that's in, 40-point font or something, you stop and look at that. And so I wanted the book to be user-friendly. And so I looked for graphics. I actually spent 2 days in a photo research lab in New York, looking through, I need a picture of a motorcycle. I need a picture of this. I need a picture of that. Now you can go online and do that at Google Images and all the other places that are photo research places. But I said, okay, what do I know? I teach something called vomit copy. You just take everything you know and you just vomit it out onto paper. The other option, and this is I did one book, is I said, okay, I'm going to do a mind map where you draw in the middle a concept, and then every little thing you can think about that concept off to the side. And then I did a mind map of the big concepts, and then of each little concept, another mind map. So like tons of little notes. Now I have to organize these notes. How do I put them together? If you're doing a cassette album or a CD album, you used to have 12 sides, 6 cassettes, 12 sides. So you're okay, I have to have 12 topics. What are my 12 topics? Or in a book, how many chapters, or what do I know that I want to say? And then put it down, then you start to organize it. With my book, The Success Principles, I thought I was going to do 101 principles. I like this 101 thing, 101 stories of chicken soup, etc. And I thought there'd be three pages, get 300 pages book. But some of them I couldn't write, and it took me 7, 8, 9, 10, 12 pages. So the book started getting way too big. And so what I did was I would outline the book, how many principles am I going to have? I cut it down to 64. And then I would just brainstorm with myself everything I knew about that principle, about that, taking responsibility, asking for what you want, asking for feedback, perseverance. Do I know a story? Do I know a concept? Is there an expert I should be looking at?
Yeah.
And then I would go back and organize that, thank God for cut and paste in the computer. And it used to be 3x5 cards on the floor. Remember that?
Yep.
Older days? And then I start to take one little piece and I write it. And then I take another little piece and I write it. And I may jump all over the book because I don't really want to do that one today. It feels too scary or whatever. And then eventually it just all fills in, kind of like flesh on bones. Fanny Flagg, who wrote Fried Green Tomatoes, I think she's dyslexic, but she's not able to concentrate real easy. When she wrote Fried Green Tomatoes, she said, I just thought back to my growing up in that town, and I would remember a story. And so I'd write that story. And she'd take a clothespin and she'd put it on a line that she had going down her hallway. And then she'd write another little story. She remembered an incident, and then she'd put that on there. Then she started to put, well, which one would come first? And that's how she wrote her novels.
Yeah.
And so everybody has to find their own way. If you're a speaker and you've got a speech, speak it, have it transcribed.
Absolutely.
You'll find that you speak a lot. Sometimes you got to clean up some of the English and so on and so forth. But I always tell people, if you're a speaker, then, record your speech. You should sell that anyway, back of the room. And then have it transcribed. And then you can start adding stuff in, fixing it up, cleaning it up, and you've got a book.
We have a program that helps people get their book out and get it onto paper. And one of the things that our coach suggests is don't do the research till later. Like if you know you need a story here, just say story or stat, but just, as you're saying, get it out of your head, out of your heart, onto paper.
I totally agree with that.
Maybe start with the chapter that you're most passionate about, So get started.
Yeah, getting started is critical. And start where it's easy. Why make it hard?
Yeah.
That gives you momentum. Build your self-confidence. You get words on paper. Sometimes I would give myself a goal, 3 pages a day, or X number of words, or write for so many hours. Like my first book that I wrote was written at night. And I would go after dinner, I would go down to the basement of this house we were renting in Massachusetts. I was a graduate student at the time. And I would write from about 8 o'clock until midnight. And that was how I did it. Now, there are other times when I would just took 2 months off and just wrote nonstop. Sometimes I'll dictate pieces and give them to someone, and then they'll type them up and I'll fix them. So it just depends on your style, what you're writing about.
What's going on in your life.
Yeah.
As you said, you've tried different things. Our mutual friend Tim Ferriss, as you know, has a whole writing ritual where I think he starts at 10, I think he was telling me he starts at 10 p.m. and goes till 2, and he gets the Malbec wine out, and he's got a ritual, of what he does.
I've never been able to write with Malbec wine.
I told him I fall asleep,
That's right. Well, Bryce Courtney, who is one of the top-selling authors in Australia, he's written, 12 novels. He writes, his first book, he had a job, he was an advertising agent. And he came home, he would have dinner with his family and play with his kids, and around 7:30, 8 o'clock, he'd go into a room and he'd write till midnight. Did that every day for a year, produced a 1,000-page novel.
Amazing. What have you learned about writing? What would you say were some things that, as you've studied different authors, and what are some things you decided that when you write and you communicate, what else did you learn that might be?
Well, I found even in a nonfiction book, I always start with a story. Because story is what grabs people. That's why movies and novels have been around forever and will continue to be around forever. We live on story.
Yeah.
And so start with a story. And don't tell people you're going to sell a story. You just say, it was June 13th. It was a rainy night. I was driving down the road wondering how I was going to pay the bills. People, yeah, me too. They're right in there with you. So that is critical, I think. And then, and you want to really engage people. I was hunkered down behind the wall, the bullets flying over my head. Really? I was like, I'm with you right now. So that's the first thing. Dialogue. When we first did Chicken Soup for the Soul, we were kind of writing about stuff. And what we realized was much more powerful if we had the characters have dialogue. Then the dialogue teaches. One of the things we learned from our feedback groups in the first Chicken Soup for the book, we always would get to the end of the story, we'd have some little moral. And therefore, you ought to call your mother and be a nice kid kind of thing,
Right.
And they'd cross it out and said, don't tell me what to think. And what was really interesting was that 5 different people would read the story and take away 5 different points and be motivated to do 5 different kinds of things. Someone might want to call their mom. Someone might want to treat their children better. Someone might want to treat themselves better, all from the same story.
Yeah.
So we realized, don't tell people what to think. Let them draw their own conclusions. I think what I've noticed about editing, it's a lot more about taking out than it is putting in. You know, normally when I
Less
write,
is more.
less is more, and the fewer words you can use, and the cut to the point, and just really, what's the structure? What are we trying to do here?